When you close your eyes and picture Russia, what do you see? Do you see a frozen, desolate wasteland dominated by spies and endless gray concrete? Or perhaps a menacing geopolitical enigma that seems increasingly isolated from the Western world? If that is the image burned into your mind, then you are looking at a map that no longer exists. What if I told you that the reality is not only different, but it is a landscape of jarring contradictions? Imagine a country where the winters can freeze your eyelashes in seconds, yet the summers transform the streets into a Mediterranean-style festival of life. A place where hyper-modern technology that surpasses Silicon Valley in convenience coexists with a deep, almost melancholic nostalgia for an imperial past. We are about to step inside the Iron Curtain not to judge, but to understand. From the frantic, power-hungry heartbeat of Moscow to the artistic, brooding soul of Saint Petersburg, we are going to dismantle the stereotypes. This isn't just a tour of Red Square. It is an investigation into how a nation lives, breathes, and reinvents itself under the weight of immense history and modern sanctions. Why do the people here never smile at strangers, yet offer you their last piece of bread? How do they navigate a digital world cut off from the West? Put aside what you think you know. We are diving into the enigma. To understand Russia, you must first understand that it is not a monolith. It is a universe unto itself, spanning 17 million square kilometers. But the gravitational center of this universe, the place where all roads, railways, and ambition eventually lead, is Moscow. There is a common misconception that all of Russia is a frozen tundra. While the northern reaches of Siberia do indeed hit bone, chilling temperatures of -50 degrees Celsius, Moscow sits in a more temperate western pocket. Don't get me wrong, winter here is not for the faint of heart. Temperatures hovering around -20 degrees are standard, and the cold can feel like a physical weight pressing against your chest. But to define Moscow by its winter is to miss the point entirely. This city is an urban leviathan. Covering only about 2,500 square kilometers, it packs in a population that rivals entire countries. Officially, it is home to around 13 million, but realistically, the metropolitan area pulses with nearly 19 million souls. It has served as the capital for over 850 years, surviving Mongols' Napoleonic fires and Nazi sieges. Today, it stands as a testament to survival and excess. When you look at the skyline, you don't just see onion domes. You see a visual timeline of power. You have the red brick of the Kremlin, the imposing Gothic towers of Stalin's Seven Sisters skyscrapers, and now, the glass and steel giants of the Moscow city business district that pierce the clouds. It is a city that screams for attention. It doesn't want to be liked. It wants to be respected. But here lies the first contradiction. Despite its massive size, Moscow is surprisingly dense and vertical. To accommodate this exploding population, the city has built upwards. You will see endless rows of high-rise apartment blocks. These aren't just housing, they are vertical villages. And living in this center of power comes with a price tag that might shock you. Let's talk about the economics of survival in the capital. Moscow is a city of billionaires, frequently topping the lists for the number of ultra-wealthy individuals living in a single city. But for the average person, or the expat looking to move here, the financial barrier is a fortress wall. If you are looking for a rental that meets Western standards, say a decent 3-bedroom apartment in a safe district, you are looking at a starting price of 100,000 rubles. In dollar terms, that is roughly $1,000 a month. That might sound reasonable compared to New York or London, until you look at the average local salary. To live a comfortable life here, dining out, enjoying the nightlife, and not worrying about the heating bill, you need a net income hovering between $4,000 and $5,000. For many locals, this is a dream, not a reality. There are cheaper options, of course. You can find apartments for 50,000 rubles, but you will be stepping into a time machine. These units are often 20 years behind in renovation, located in the far-flung sleeping districts, or microscopic in size. But here is the crucial detail that most travel guides omit: the elephant in the room: sanctions. How does a modern metropolis function when it is cut off from the Western financial system? If you come here today, your Visa and MasterCard are useless pieces of plastic. The connection to Apple Pay and Google Pay is severed. Russia has had to pivot, and they did it with startling speed. They rely on their own domestic payment system called Mir, and cash has made a king-like return for foreigners. Yet, despite the geopolitical isolation, the streets of Moscow tell a different story. You might expect empty shelves or a lack of luxury, but walk down the streets of Malaya Brnaya or Petrovka, and you are greeted by a parade of Ferraris, Lamborghinis, and Maybachs. The wealthy elite, the oligarchs, and the new money still flaunt their status. The sirens of government convoys still part the traffic like the Red Sea. Western brands have vanished, yes. Starbucks is gone, replaced by Stars Coffee. McDonald's is now Vikasno I Taka, which translates to Tasty, and that's it. The logos have changed, the ownership has shifted, but the consumerist rhythm of the city hasn't skipped a beat. It is a surreal experience to see a city that looks so familiar, yet feels like an alternate reality version of the West. If the surface of Moscow is about money, the underground is about ideology. You cannot speak of this city without descending into its depths. The Moscow Metro is not public transport, it is a subterranean museum. Built during the Stalinist era, these stations were designed as palaces for the people. The idea was that the average worker, who might live in a cramped communal apartment, should feel like royalty on their way to work. And it holds up. We are talking about marble columns, bronze chandeliers, intricate mosaics, and statues of revolutionary heroes. There is no graffiti here, no trash. It is spotless, efficient, and aggressively beautiful. With over 250 stations and growing, it is one of the most extensive networks on Earth. And this brings us to a surprising truth about modern Russia: the technology. Contrary to the image of a backward bureaucracy, Moscow is arguably more digitized than many European capitals. The tech ecosystem here is entirely homegrown. Since Google and Uber face restrictions or competition, Russia has Yandex. It is a super app that controls everything: taxes, food delivery, maps, and even car sharing. You can get groceries delivered to your door in 15 minutes at 2 in the morning. The city is wired. Free Wi-Fi is everywhere, even deep underground in the metro tunnels. This digital convenience acts as a counterbalance to the heavy bureaucracy. It is a way to bypass the friction of daily life. And the people use it constantly. Look around, and you will see heads buried in smartphones, scrolling, chatting, taking selfies. This brings us to the people themselves. There is a stereotype that Russians are cold, that they never smile. Walking the streets, you will see the famous Russian face, a neutral, guarded expression. But do not mistake this for hostility. In Russian culture, a smile is a guarded gift, not a public mask. Smiling at a stranger without a reason is often seen as insincere or even a sign of foolishness. But the moment you break that ice, the moment you become a guest or a friend, that cold exterior shatters to reveal an intensity of warmth and loyalty that is rare in the West. Now, let's address a gaping hole in most observations of this country: the food. You cannot understand the Russian soul without sitting at their table. In the city center, you have world-class dining that rivals Paris or Tokyo. But to taste the real Russia, you must avoid the white tablecloths and find a stolovaya. These are canteen-style cafeterias, a relic of the Soviet Union that has been modernized. Here, you grab a tray and slide it along the rail. What is on the menu? First, borscht. It is not just beet soup, it is a religion. Rich red, served with a dollop of sour cream called smetana and garlic pampushki bread. Then there are pelmeni, dumplings filled with meat that are the ultimate comfort food for a cold winter. And blini, thin pancakes that can be savory with caviar or sweet with honey. This food tells a story of survival. It is heavy, caloric, and designed to keep you warm. But dining here isn't just about fuel. The social life of Moscow revolves around food and drink. Despite the harsh climate, the people here have a zest for outdoor socializing that is puzzling. In the evenings, the embankments of the Moskva River fill up. You will see a peculiar sight: cars parked with their trunks open, hookahs or shisha set up right there on the pavement, music blasting. It is a pop-up party culture. Since indoor smoking bans are strict, the trunk of a car becomes the living room. And there is a generational divide visible on these streets. Moscow is a young city. You rarely see the elderly in the trendy districts. They are often relegated to the outer boroughs or the dacha, the country house. The streets belong to the under 50 crowd. They are fashionable, extremely conscious of their appearance, and eager to prove that they are part of the modern world, regardless of what politics dictate. If Moscow is the husband, stern, powerful, the provider, then Saint Petersburg is the wife, beautiful, artistic, and sophisticated. We now leave the capital and travel north, to the city that was built to rival the grandeur of Europe. Saint Petersburg is an anomaly. It shouldn't exist. Founded in 1703 by Tsar Peter the Great, it was built on a mosquito-infested swamp at the cost of thousands of serf lives. Peter hated the backwardness of old Russia. He wanted a window to the west. He imported Italian architects, Dutch engineers, and French sensibilities to create a city of canals and palaces. The contrast with Moscow is immediate. Moscow is a chaotic mix of eras. St. Petersburg is a harmonious masterpiece of the Baroque and Neoclassical. It sits on the delta of the Neva River, fracturing into 42 islands connected by hundreds of bridges. They call it the Venice of the North, but with a grandeur that feels distinctly imperial. While Moscow is landlocked, St. Petersburg faces the Gulf of Finland and the Baltic Sea. This maritime connection has always made the city feel more open, more European. Before the current geopolitical freeze, it was just a 2-hour drive to Estonia or a short train ride to Finland. The people here have always looked west. The vibe is slower. If Moscow is about making money, St. Petersburg is about spending time. It is the cultural capital. You walk down Nevsky Prospect, the main artery, and you don't see the brutalist concrete of the Soviets. You see pastel-colored palaces, immaculate cobblestones, and the Kazan Cathedral with its sweeping colonnade that mimics St. Peter's in Rome. There is a magical, almost disorienting phenomenon that defines this city, the White Nights. Because of its northern latitude, on the same parallel as southern Greenland, from late May to early July, the sun refuses to set. It dips below the horizon, but the sky remains a twilight glow. Streetlights are unnecessary. The city enters a state of insomnia. This is when St. Petersburg truly comes alive. The Scarlet Sails Festival transforms the Neva River into a theater of fireworks and ships. But the real spectacle happens every night at 1 in the morning. The massive bridges across the Neva draw open to let heavy ships pass. Crowds gather on the embankments, drinking champagne, watching the city literally split in two. If you are on the wrong side of the river when the bridges open, you are stranded until morning. It is a romantic inconvenience that the locals cherish. But this beauty masks a scar. You cannot walk these streets without acknowledging the ghost of Leningrad, the city's name during the Soviet era. During World War II, this city endured the 900-day siege of Leningrad by Nazi forces. It was one of the most horrific chapters in human history. Starvation was rampant. People ate glue, leather, and worse to survive. Yet, the city did not surrender. The resilience of the Leningraders is woven into the DNA of the current residents. When you see the perfectly preserved palaces, remember that they were restored from ruins by a people who refused to let their culture die. This history creates a unique personality type. The Peterburgi, or residents of St. Petersburg, are often seen as more intellectual, more reserved, and perhaps a bit more melancholic than Muscovites. They read more. They value art over commerce. The Hermitage Museum here is not just a building, it is a declaration of cultural supremacy, housing millions of artworks in the former Winter Palace of the Tsars. However, living in a museum is expensive. Just like in Moscow, the cost of living in St. Petersburg has skyrocketed. The demand from Russia's 145 million people, many of whom dream of moving to these two cities, keeps prices high. A decent apartment here will also set you back nearly $1,000 a month, which is a fortune compared to the rest of the vast country. But the layout of life is different. In the older parts of the city, you still find communal apartments where multiple families share a kitchen and bathroom. It is a fading remnant of the Soviet experiment in shared living, coexisting right next to luxury condos for the new elite. The weather is another challenge. While Moscow has a crisp, dry cold, St. Petersburg is wet, windy, and gray. The proximity to the Baltic Sea means the weather changes every 15 minutes. The locals joke that Peter the Great chose the worst possible climate for the most beautiful city. Yet, despite the rain and the cost, the allure remains. The city is a hub for education with over 40 universities. It attracts the creative minds, the engineers, the dreamers. It is less aggressive than Moscow, more contemplative. So, we have two cities that represent the dual nature of Russia. Moscow is the fortress, high walls, high towers, high stakes. It is the brain of the country, processing power, finance, and control. It is where you go to achieve. St. Petersburg is the soul. It is open to the sea, vulnerable, beautiful, and deeply complex. It is where you go to feel. But what about the rest of the world's interaction with them? Today, the flow of foreign tourists has trickled down due to strained diplomatic relations and the suspension of Western flights. The Red Square is no longer filled with languages from every corner of the globe. Instead, domestic tourism is booming. Russians are rediscovering their own country. And for the intrepid traveler who still makes the journey, the experience is polarizing. You will face the hurdles of visas, the impossibility of using your bank cards, and the moral weight of visiting a nation in conflict. But you will also find a society that is functioning, vibrant, and incredibly distinct. You will see a people who are addicted to capturing beauty. Watch how the women pose effortlessly for photos on every corner, a sign of a society that values aesthetics and self-presentation immensely. You will hear music on the streets, from classical violins to rock bands, proving that culture here is public property. You will see a cleanliness in the streets that puts many Western capitals to shame. You won't find litter on Nevsky Prospect or near the Kremlin. Russia is not a riddle to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. It is a place where the history is heavy, but the people are surprisingly light-hearted when you peel back the layers. It is a land where an imperial past, a Soviet shadow, and a capitalist present are all fighting for space on the same sidewalk. Moscow and St. Petersburg are the two eyes of this giant, one looking inward at the vastness of the land and its power, the other looking outward, yearning for connection with the world. Whether this country remains behind a new curtain or eventually reopens its doors fully, one thing is certain: it will continue to fascinate, confuse, and captivate those who dare to look closer. The question is, if you stood in the middle of Red Square today, surrounded by the echoes of tsars and commissars, would you feel the weight of history or the pulse of the future? If this journey behind the headlines surprised you, or if you've ever walked these streets yourself, tell me in the comments, what is the one thing about Russia that contradicts what you see on the news? And if you want to continue exploring the world's most complex and misunderstood destinations with us, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We are just getting started. Safe travels and keep your eyes open.